My parents told me she was healthy and strong. They didn't tell me she was this.
The groom refused to marry her at the altar, but a cowboy in the crowd said, "I will." "Hannah!" The voice cracked like a whip through the morning air. "Get up this instant." Hannah's eyes flew open. Her heart thudded hard against her chest. The morning light barely broke through the cracks in the wooden walls, but her mother was already standing in the doorway, hands on her hips, eyes sharp with disdain. "The groom's family arrives by noon," her mother said coldly. "Get downstairs. The aunts are here. Start cooking breakfast." Hannah forced herself up and hurried downstairs. The kitchen filled with voices. 3 aunts crowded around the table, their eyes following Hannah like predators. "There's the bride," Aunt Clara said with a tight smile. Hannah kept her head down, mixing flour. The aunts whispered constantly, their words sharp as glass. "She's gotten so big. Let's hope he's a forgiving man." When breakfast was served, her mother pulled Hannah upstairs. The tin tub sat in the corner, filled with lukewarm water. "Strip to your shift and wash. Quickly. I'll be right outside." Hannah undressed to her thin cotton undergarment and stepped into the cold water. She scrubbed fast, hands shaking. Through the door, she heard the aunts laughing in the hallway. When she finished, her mother entered with a towel. "Dry off. Time to dress you." The aunts filed in, carrying the corset and red dress. Hannah stood trembling in her damp shift. "Arms up, dear," Aunt Clara said. The corset wrapped around her middle. Her mother pulled the laces from behind. "Breathe in." Hannah inhaled. The laces yanked hard. "Tighter." "Mama, I can't." "You will," her mother snarled. "Suck in. Don't shame us." The laces cut into her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. She gripped the bedpost to stay standing. Aunt Ruth shook her head. "Should have been more careful with her portions." Her mother yanked harder. "Should have thought of this at every meal." Finally, the knot tied. Hannah could barely breathe. They lifted the red dress over her head. It clung to every curve, tight and unforgiving. The aunts fastened the back roughly. Her mother turned her toward the mirror. Hannah stared at her flushed face, her heaving chest. She looked like a bride wrapped for delivery. "He's never seen you," her mother said flatly. "Your father arranged everything through letters." Hannah's throat closed. The wagon ride felt endless. Each bump sent pain through her compressed ribs. When the church came into view, Hannah's heart began to race. People had already gathered outside. Women in their Sunday dresses. Men in clean shirts. Children running between the adults. All of them turned to watch as the wagon approached. The whispers started immediately. "Is that her? Oh Lord, look at the size of her. That poor man." Hannah's legs shook as she climbed down from the wagon. Her mother gripped her arm tightly and pulled her toward the church doors. The crowd parted to let them through, but the whispers followed like a swarm of insects. Inside, the church was warm and crowded. Every wooden bench was filled. Faces turned as one to watch her enter. At the front stood the preacher in his black coat, Bible open in his hands. And beside him stood the groom. He was tall and lean, his shoulders slightly hunched. His face was pale. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him. He had not yet turned to look. Hannah's mother released her arm. "Go," she whispered harshly. Hannah took a step forward. Her shoe echoed loudly on the wooden floor. She took another step. Then another. Every eye in the room followed her. She could feel their stares pressing against her skin. The groom turned his head. He saw her. His face went completely still. His eyes widened. They traveled slowly down her body, then back up to her face. His mouth opened slightly. The color drained from his cheeks. Hannah kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Her legs felt like they might give out. She reached the front and stopped beside him. The groom did not look at her. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, breathing hard through his nose. The preacher cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." No. The word cut through the air like a gunshot. The preacher stopped. I beg your pardon? The groom turned to face the crowd. His voice was loud and clear. I said no. I will not marry her. Gasps erupted. Hands flew to mouths. Hannah's heart stopped. The groom pointed directly at her. Look at her. My parents told me she was healthy and strong. They didn't tell me she was this. Laughter burst from the back rows. Cruel, sharp laughter. His face twisted with disgust. I would rather work my land alone for the rest of my life than be shackled to that. He turned and walked toward the door. His boots echoed in the sudden silence. He shoved the door open and disappeared into the sunlight. The church exploded. Voices everywhere. Shouting. Laughing. Whispering. Hannah stood frozen at the altar. She could not move. Could not breathe. The red dress crushed her ribs. The room spun. Her mother's face was stone. Her father looked away. The aunts whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Hannah had never felt so small. So exposed. So worthless. Every cruel word she had ever been told was true. The church buzzed with chaos. Voices overlapped. Some laughed. Some whispered frantically. Others simply stared at Hannah, still frozen at the altar. The preacher stood awkwardly, his Bible still open in his hands. He looked around helplessly, unsure what to do. Then the heavy church doors swung open. The sheriff stepped inside. His boots echoed loud on the wooden floor. The crowd quieted immediately. He was a tall man with a thick mustache and hard eyes. His hand rested on the gun at his hip. He walked down the aisle slowly, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene. When he reached the altar, he stopped and turned to face the crowd. What happened here? His voice was calm but commanding. The preacher cleared his throat nervously. The groom refused the marriage, sheriff. He walked out. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He turned to look at Hannah, still standing in her red dress, trembling. This marriage was arranged, the sheriff said, his voice growing louder. Contracts were signed. Agreements were made. It will be honored. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The sheriff's eyes swept the room. I need a man to step forward and fulfill this contract. Silence. Nobody moved. The sheriff's face hardened. I'll make it worth your while. Any man who marries this girl today will receive 50 acres of land on the eastern ridge. Good land. Fertile soil. The crowd stirred. A few men glanced at each other. One leaned forward slightly, considering. Then they looked at Hannah. One by one, they shook their heads and sat back. Not worth it, someone muttered from the middle row. Not for 100 acres, another voice added. Laughter rippled through the church again. Cruel and cutting. Hannah's face burned. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to run, to disappear. But her legs would not move. The sheriff's face darkened. 50 acres and 10 head of cattle. Still, no one moved. Hannah felt her chest tighten even more. The corset squeezed her ribs. Each breath came shorter than the last. She was being auctioned like livestock. And no one wanted her. Her mother sat in the front row, her face pale with shame. Her father stared at the floor. The sheriff opened his mouth to speak again. Then, from the very back of the church, a voice rang out. I'll marry her. Every head turned. A man stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong, muscular arms. His face was weathered from the sun, his jaw square and firm. He had the look of a man who worked hard and spoke little. The crowd gasped. Whispers exploded. That's the cowboy from the northern ranch. He could have any woman. Why would he choose her? The man walked down the aisle. His boots thudded heavily on the wooden floor. His eyes were fixed straight ahead. He did not look at the crowd. He did not acknowledge their whispers. He walked all the way to the front and stopped in front of the sheriff. The sheriff studied him carefully. You accept the offer? 50 acres and 10 cattle? The cowboy's voice was deep and steady. Keep your land. Keep your cattle. I don't want them. The church fell completely silent. The sheriff's eyebrows lifted. Then why? The cowboy did not answer. Instead, he turned and looked directly at Hannah. His eyes were calm. Not mocking. Not disgusted. Just steady. If you'll have me, he said quietly. Hannah stared at him. Her mind raced. She did not understand. Why would he do this? What did he want from her? But she had no choice. No other option. She nodded. The cowboy turned back to the preacher. Let's finish this. The preacher fumbled with his Bible, clearly flustered. Yes. Of course. Right, dearly beloved. He rushed through the vows quickly. His voice shook slightly. The crowd remained silent, watching in stunned disbelief. When the preacher finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the cowboy simply nodded once and stepped back. "That won't be necessary," he said. The preacher closed his Bible. "Then I pronounce you husband and wife." The cowboy turned to Hannah. "We're leaving." Hannah followed him down the aisle. Her legs felt weak. Every eye in the church followed them. The whispers started again, louder this time. What is he thinking? He'll regret it by morning. Poor fool. The cowboy pushed the church doors open. Sunlight poured in. He walked outside without looking back. Hannah followed him into the light, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. A wagon stood waiting. The cowboy climbed up and extended his hand to help her. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm. Strong, he pulled her up easily. He snapped the reins. The wagon jerked forward. They rode in silence. The church disappeared behind them. The town faded into the distance. Hannah sat stiffly beside him, hands folded in her lap. She wanted to speak, to ask why. But the words stuck in her throat. The cowboy stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. The only sound was the creak of the wagon wheels and the rhythm of the horse's hooves. Hannah's heart pounded. She had escaped one humiliation, but now she rode toward an unknown future with a man she did not know. A man who had refused land and cattle to marry her. And she had no idea why. The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. It sat alone on a wide stretch of land, surrounded by rolling fields and distant hills. The house was simple but well built. A barn stood nearby. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture. The cowboy brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He climbed down and walked around to Hannah's side. He extended his hand again. She took it and stepped down carefully. Her legs were stiff from the long ride. The corset still squeezed her ribs with every breath. He gestured toward the house. "Come inside." Hannah followed him up the wooden steps and through the front door. The inside was clean and organized. A stone fireplace sat against one wall. A table and 2 chairs in the center. Shelves lined with simple dishes and supplies. He walked across the room and opened a door. "This is your room." Hannah stepped inside. It was small but neat. A bed with a thick quilt. A window overlooking the fields. A dresser in the corner. "You can rest," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." Before Hannah could respond, he stepped back and closed the door. She stood alone in the quiet room. Her heart pounded. She waited for him to come back, to tell her what he wanted, what he expected. But he did not return. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. She did not understand. Why had he married her? What did he want? The questions spun in her mind, but no answers came. Finally, exhausted, she lay down. The corset dug into her sides. She could not loosen it herself. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but fear kept her awake for hours. The next morning, Hannah woke to the sound of a rooster crowing. Sunlight streamed through the window. She sat up slowly, her body aching. She opened the door cautiously. The house was quiet. The cowboy was not inside. She stepped outside and saw him near the barn, feeding the horses. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps but said nothing. Hannah stood awkwardly by the porch, unsure what to do. Finally, he walked toward her. There's bread and butter inside. Coffee too. Help yourself. His voice was calm. Not cruel. Not angry. Just distant. Thank you, Hannah whispered. He nodded once and walked back toward the barn. The days began to blur together. The cowboy showed her where things were. The well. The chicken coop. The garden. He spoke only when necessary. Short sentences. Simple instructions. Hannah worked hard. She cooked. She cleaned. She gathered eggs and tended the garden. She tried to prove her worth. To show him she was useful. But he remained distant. At meals, they sat across from each other in silence. He ate quickly and left. She cleaned the dishes alone. At night, she lay in her room, listening to the sounds of the house. His footsteps. The creak of his chair. The occasional clink of a cup. But he never came to her door. Hannah's confusion grew into something heavier. Fear. Doubt. Why did he marry me? She whispered to herself one night. What does he want? The silence gave no answers. One evening, after another quiet meal, Hannah could not hold it in any longer. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Why did you marry me? The cowboy looked up, surprised. Hannah's voice shook. You refused the sheriff's land. You refused the cattle. So what do you want from me? He set down his cup slowly. I don't understand. Everyone wants something. Hannah's voice rose. So what is it? What's the real reason? He stood, his face unreadable. I saw you standing there. Everyone mocking you. And you didn't run. Hannah shook her head. That's not a reason. That's pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? Tears filled her eyes. Tell me the truth. He was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. It's courage. Hannah stared at him. Courage. You stood there when the whole world told you that you were nothing. That takes strength most people don't have. Hannah's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. But years of cruelty had built walls too high. I don't need your pity, she whispered. His jaw tightened. It's not pity. But Hannah turned and walked back to her room. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, tears streaming down her face. Outside, the cowboy stood alone in the kitchen. He looked at the closed door for a long moment. Then he turned and walked outside into the night. The distance between them remained. A wall neither knew how to break. The morning sun was barely up when the cowboy knocked on Hannah's door. I'm riding out to check the fences, he called through the wood. You can come if you want. Hannah hesitated. She had kept to herself for days, the walls between them still thick. But something in his tone was different. Gentler. She opened the door. I've never ridden a horse. He nodded once. Then today you'll learn. Outside, he brought a calm mare forward. The horse was brown with gentle eyes. Hannah stared at the animal nervously. I'm too heavy, she whispered. I'll hurt her. The cowboy's voice was firm but kind. She's stronger than you think. Like you. He helped Hannah into the saddle. His hands were steady on her waist as he lifted her. The touch was brief, but Hannah felt the warmth of it long after he stepped back. When she was seated, he adjusted the reins in her grip. His fingers brushed against hers as he positioned them correctly. Hold here. Sit steady. She'll follow my lead. He mounted his own horse and started forward at a slow walk. Hannah's horse followed. At first, Hannah gripped the saddle so tightly her knuckles turned white. Relax, the cowboy called back. She can feel your fear. Breathe. Hannah tried to breathe deeply. Slowly, as the horse moved beneath her with steady rhythm, something inside her loosened. She laughed. A small, surprised sound. The cowboy glanced back. A faint smile touched his lips. You're doing fine. They rode across the fields together. The morning air was cool and fresh. For the first time in weeks, Hannah felt something other than fear. She felt free. When they returned, the cowboy showed her how to brush the horse down. How to check her hooves. How to feed her properly. She trusts you now, he said quietly. Hannah looked at him. How do you know? She wouldn't have let you ride her otherwise. Horses know. Hannah's hand stilled on the horse's coat. I wish people were like that. The cowboy's eyes met hers. Some people can. That afternoon, they worked side by side mending a fence. He showed her how to hammer the nails straight, how to pull the wire tight. Hannah reached for a nail at the same moment he did. Their fingers touched. Both hesitated. Neither pulled away immediately. Then he cleared his throat softly and handed her the nail. Here. When she made a mistake and the board split, he simply handed her another piece. Try again. You'll get it. No anger. No criticism. Just patience. Hannah hammered the nail carefully this time. It went in clean and straight. Good, he said. You're a quick learner. The days began to shift. Meals were no longer silent. Small conversations started. The weather. The animals. The work that needed doing. One morning, Hannah was kneading bread dough when a strand of hair fell across her face. She tried to push it back with her flour-covered hand, but it wouldn't stay. The cowboy walked past, then paused. He reached out and gently tucked the strand behind her ear. There? He said quietly. His fingers lingered for just a moment. Then he stepped back and continued to the door. Hannah stood frozen, her heart beating faster. One evening, as Hannah set dinner on the table, she saw him sitting by the fire. In his hands was a silver locket. He held it carefully, staring down at the open face inside. Hannah hesitated, then spoke softly. May I ask who she was? He did not close the locket. My wife, he said quietly. Her name was Sarah. She died 3 years ago. Childbirth. The baby too. A boy. Hannah's heart ached. She sat in the chair across from him. I'm so sorry. He nodded slowly. I thought I'd never marry again. That part of my life was over. He looked up at her. Then I saw you in that church, standing there while everyone mocked you. And you didn't run. His voice grew quieter. And I saw someone who understood what it was to be alone. Truly alone. Hannah's throat tightened. I've been alone my whole life, she whispered. My mother told me every day that I was worthless. The town laughed at me everywhere I went. And I believed them. His eyes never left hers. They were wrong. How can you know that? Because I've watched you. You work harder than anyone I've known. You don't complain. You just keep going. That's strength, Hannah. Real strength. Tears filled Hannah's eyes. I thought you pitied me. He shook his head. I chose you. There's a difference. The next day, they worked together repairing the chicken coop. Hannah climbed up on a stool to reach the damaged boards. As she stretched for a nail, the stool wobbled. She gasped, losing her balance. Strong arms caught her immediately. The cowboy steadied her, his hands firm on her waist. For a moment, they stood close, her hands gripping his shoulders, his face just inches from hers. I've got you, he said quietly. Hannah's breath caught. She could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Thank you, she whispered. He helped her down slowly, making sure she was steady before letting go. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the sky. Lightning flashed through the windows. Rain pounded the roof. Hannah had always feared storms. The thunder boomed again, rattling the windows. Her breath came faster. Her hands shook. A soft knock came at her door. Hannah. She opened it with trembling hands. The cowboy stood there, concern in his eyes. You all right? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, he stepped inside and sat in the chair by her window. I'll stay until it passes, he said quietly. He began to talk. About his childhood on a farm in Missouri. About his parents. About the first time he rode a horse. His voice was calm and steady, cutting through the sound of the storm. Hannah sat on the edge of her bed, listening. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Her hands stopped shaking. When the rain finally softened, he stood to leave. Hannah stood too. Wait. Turned. Thank you, she said. For everything. For seeing me. He took a step closer. You're not hard to see, Hannah. They stood in the dim light, closer than they had ever been. Hannah's heart pounded. His hand lifted slowly. His fingers brushed against her cheek, wiping away the last trace of tears. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. You're safe here. Always. And for the first time in her life, she believed him. The walls between them finally crumbled. Several weeks passed before they needed to return to town. Supplies were running low. The cowboy hitched the wagon early one morning. We'll go together, he said. Get what we need and come straight back. Hannah's stomach twisted with dread. Do we have to, Ethan? He looked at her steadily. You can't hide from them forever. And you shouldn't have to. The ride into town felt too short. With every mile, Hannah's anxiety grew. Her hands twisted in her lap. Ethan reached over and covered her hand with his. I'm right beside you, he said quietly. You're not alone. When they rolled into the main street, heads turned immediately. Whispers started like wildfire. There they are. Can you believe he's still with her? Poor man. Bet he regrets it every single day. Hannah's face burned. She kept her eyes down as they climbed from the wagon. Ethan walked close beside her, his presence solid and steady. They entered the general store. The shopkeeper's eyes widened. Other customers turned to stare. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Ethan ignored them all. He moved through the aisles, gathering flour, sugar, coffee. Hannah stayed close, her heart pounding. Outside, a crowd had begun to gather. When they stepped back onto the street, the original groom stood waiting. He leaned against a post, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. Well, he said loudly. If it isn't the happy couple. Ethan kept walking, guiding Hannah toward the wagon. The groom pushed off the post and stepped into their path. Tell me, cowboy, was the sheriff's land worth it? Was shackling yourself to that worth 50 acres? The crowd laughed. More people gathered, sensing confrontation. Ethan stopped. He set down the supplies carefully. Then he turned to face the groom. I didn't take the land, he said, his voice calm but carrying across the street. I refused it. The groom's smirk faltered. What? I refused the sheriff's offer. Every bit of it. The land. The cattle. All of it. Confused whispers rippled through the crowd. The groom laughed nervously. Then you're an even bigger fool than I thought. Why would you? Because I chose her, Ethan said, his voice growing stronger. Not for land. Not for money. I chose her because I wanted to. The crowd fell silent. Ethan turned to face them all. You people think you know worth. You think you can measure a person by how they look. By what you see on the outside. He gestured toward Hannah. This woman works harder than any of you. She's kinder than you deserve. And she has more courage in one day than most of you will have in your entire lives. He looked directly at the groom. You had the chance to marry her. And you threw it away because you're too blind and too stupid to see what was right in front of you. The groom's face turned red. She's nothing but. She's my wife. Ethan's voice rang out like thunder. And she's worth 10 of you. 100 of you. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they were not tears of shame. Ethan turned to her. He extended his hand. Dance with me. Hannah's breath caught. What? Dance with me. Right here. Right now. Hannah shook her head, fear flooding back. They'll laugh. They'll. Let them, he said. His eyes were steady and sure. I only see you. Music drifted from the saloon down the street. A fiddle playing a slow, sweet melody. Ethan took her hand gently. He placed his other hand at her waist. And in the middle of the dusty street, surrounded by the entire town, they began to dance. Hannah's feet moved carefully at first. She was terrified of stumbling, of proving them all right. But Ethan led her with confidence. His grip was strong and sure. He turned her slowly, smoothly. His eyes never left hers. "You're doing beautifully," he whispered. Hannah felt something break open inside her chest. The fear began to fade. She let herself follow his lead. Let herself trust him completely. They moved together across the dirt street. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one laughed. No one spoke. Because what they saw was not a clumsy woman and a fool. They saw grace. They saw partnership. This all of. When the music faded, Ethan stopped. He looked down at Hannah and she looked up at him. Then something extraordinary happened. A few people began to clap. Slowly at first. Then others joined in. Not everyone. Some still scowled. Some turned away in disgust. But enough clapped that it mattered. Hannah's mother stood on the edge of the crowd, her face unreadable. Hannah met her eyes. And for the first time in her life, she did not look away. "I am not worthless," Hannah said, her voice clear and strong. "You told me I was. Every single day. And I believed you." Her voice grew stronger. "But I was wrong to believe you. I am wanted. I am chosen. I am loved." Her mother's face twisted. She turned and walked away quickly. Hannah watched her go. And felt nothing but relief. Ethan's hand squeezed hers gently. "Ready to go home?" Hannah looked up at him. "Yes." They climbed into the wagon together. As they rode out of town, Hannah did not look back. Not once. Ethan glanced at her. "You were incredible back there." Hannah smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I felt incredible." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Hannah spoke quietly. "Why did you really choose me? I need to know the truth." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because when I saw you standing at that altar, alone and humiliated, you didn't beg. You didn't plead. You just stood there with your head up. That's dignity. That's strength." He paused. "And because I knew what it was to be lonely. To feel like the world had moved on without you. When I saw you, I saw someone who understood that. Someone I could build a life with. Not because I pitied you, but because I respected you." Hannah's throat tightened with emotion. "I thought no one could ever love me." "I do," he said simply. "I love you, Hannah." The words hung in the air between them. Hannah had never heard those words before. Not once in her entire life. "I love you too, Ethan," she whispered. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting. Golden light spilled across the fields. Hannah climbed down from the wagon and stood looking at the house. Ethan came to stand beside her. He took her hand. "Welcome home," he said. And Hannah knew, finally and completely, that she was. Not because someone had taken pity on her. Not because she had been forced or settled for. But because she had been chosen. Truly chosen. And because she had finally learned to choose herself.